Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Erica, Alex, and myself today for empowering employees and cultivating a culture of curiosity and growth. I will say that the prep session for this was one of my favorite prep sessions I've ever been a part of. So I am so excited for this webinar and to have you all join us here today. So to get the chat rolling a little bit, I know that we normally ask, where you're tuning in from, things like that, but I want to know, what is your go-to coffee, tea, morning drink order? I really want to go make another cup of coffee right now because that's all we've been talking about the past couple minutes. But I am a latte girl. I love a little bit of steamed milk with some brown sugar and vanilla. I just love anything that's just very flavorful and full of spices. So what about you, Erica? What's your go-to order?
I just have to say I'm loving the responses already. I am a chai girl, grew up on tea and then was introduced to chai, and I have completely fallen in love with it and never come back.
I love it. I love a good chai. What about you, Alex?
So I think for me, it's my iced oat milk latte that I have pretty much every day. But I think I may have shared with you on days when I'm not feeling the coffee buzz, I drink more of an iced black tea, just to switch it up. So it definitely depends on my mood and my taste buds on that day, to be
I like it. I
Your
love
taste buds are curious.
fair.
Like,
keeping
let's
it
keep the
keeping it
spark going.
curious, Erica. Keeping it curious.
We have so many great comments in the chat. We have Americanos, some plain black. My husband every morning drinks plain black coffee, and I could never, but more power to you for drinking plain black coffee every morning. We have another oat milk latte. So many great options. This one I didn't prep y'all for, Erica and Alex, but I know that some people are very hot coffee only, iced coffee only. Where do y'all fall on that?
So I'll kick it off. I'd say these days mainly iced. I mean, it's funny. I've lived across the U.S., but so particularly on the West Coast, probably not a surprise because weather year round is great, so you can get away with it. But I was one of those, strange, some might say, individuals in New York in the middle of winter who would still be ordering an iced coffee. So yeah, I'd say go to is on the ice side for me.
You're the wear sandals in the winter, right?
Yeah, I don't. That surprisingly, that's my cutoff on the curiosity front, Erica.
What
I
about you, Erica?
I'm weather dependent. However, I will say that this last year I have gone more for iced than not, even if it's cold out.
Okay, see, Alex, I'm opposite strangeness. I live in Dallas, Texas, hot as can be, and I want hot coffee year round, no matter what. So I have a lot of friends and family that say that I'm pretty strange for that too. But oh, well, I love this conversation. But why don't we, in a minute, get into the nuts and bolts of why we're all here today? So, a couple housekeeping things. I will be sharing the Sherman HRCI codes towards the end of the webinar, so make sure you stay for that. And then, additionally, after the webinar, either today or tomorrow, I will be sending the recording of this so that y'all can go back and watch it or share it with your friends, family, colleagues, whoever. I know this will be an awesome conversation today. So I am excited to get started. So let's start off with some introductions. Erica, do you mind going first and telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Erica Hansen. I'm a Bravely coach. I've been a coach on the Bravely platform for almost 4 years. Also partnered with them to help them develop their learning courses. So I facilitate those. I also have my own business off the Bravely platform called Life Integrated Coaching, where the foundation is curiosity and a curiosity framework that I developed that is applicable both internally and externally.
I love that. Thank you so much for being here today, Erica. And no relation, even though we both have the same last name, Hansen, for everyone on the call.
We
Just
compared our family trees, no separate gardens, but the same park.
there we go.
Yeah,
What
and
about
if anybody wants to read, I didn't go into my credentials. You can find my credentials on LinkedIn. So
and I just shared all of our LinkedIn's in the chat as well, so please feel free to connect with us. Alex, you want to give a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am Alex Seiler. My background is as a chief people officer and a startup advisor. So I've been in the HR and people space for 15 plus years. It's really more like 20, but I prefer saying 15 plus. And I've worked in everything from big multinational companies, the arc of my career, to small and mid-sized companies. Diversity runs through my blood in terms of everything I do and also where I'm from. So I'm half British and half Swiss, and I was born and raised in Hong Kong, and I've been in the US for 20 years. So strong believer in all things DEI as well. And like I say, I advise a few different startups as well, including When, Kindred Minds, and also Change Engine. So this topic is very, even though I didn't come up with a curiosity model, but now I'm curious about that too, Erica, is very, very near and dear to my heart. I have naturally always been a curious employee. I have also been somebody who has tended to want to push boundaries, and then also feeling the ability to do our jobs involves us feeling empowered in order to do them. So this speaks to me on many levels. So I'm really excited to be here today. And yeah, and feel free to connect on LinkedIn as well. I love making new connections and building relationships with new people.
Amazing. I'm so excited to have you both here today. And again, thank you everyone for joining us and taking time out of your day to hear these awesome discussions we're about to have. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to put them in the Q&A in Zoom. If you put them in the chat, sometimes they just get lost if we get the conversations flowing in the chat. So feel free to put any questions at all in the Q&A. And with that, let's start off with kind of a broad overarching question. How do you define employee empowerment and a culture of curiosity and growth? And why are they really crucial concepts in today's workplace? Erica, do you want to kick us off with that one?
sure. I was giving this a lot of thought, and as much as I kept trying to come up with a separate employee empowerment, I kept going back to the culture of curiosity. Because for me, creating that culture of curiosity in of itself is empowering your employees. And it's empowering them to feel like they can voice different ways of going about things. It's a way that can achieve a level of support. It can open up resources. None of it matters though if your own manager or the leadership or the organization also does not model that. So you'll probably find that that's a key of mine. Nothing matters if it's not being modeled at all levels. And so that support, that resources, that ability to think outside the box, that's a culture of curiosity. And to me, that leads to empowerment. I don't think that empowerment can exist without curiosity. I'm a little biased, but yeah.
I love that. Alex, do you have anything you want to say to that? Or just
Yeah,
in
yeah.
general?
So, well, I would just say plus 100 to everything that Erica just said. But she, as I thought she would, she said some things that created some additional thoughts and ideas for myself, which is I absolutely agree that it needs to be modeled at the highest levels in order for it to sort of trickle down. And I think that is so important because that's the only way that you're going to be able to enable employees to really take ownership of their work and feel like they can actually make legitimate decisions and contribute ideas and different perspectives within your organization as well. So I think that's a big part of it. I also think, you know, it's one thing to have core values, but, you know, written somewhere on a wall, but you have to be living them. Kind of going back to Erica's point, if you say that you are a curious environment, then you need to demonstrate that through your actions as well. So that's what I would add there.
Yeah.
I love that. So what are some, we're going to get a little bit more into like practical things that we can do and steps. So what are some practical steps that organizations can really take to shift from sort of a top-down approach to learning and development to one that really empowers employees to drive their growth? I know that employees, companies, leadership, all playing a part of it. But what are your thoughts on that?
Want to take this one first, Alex?
Yeah, sure. So I would say I'm just thinking about I always put the lens on as both myself as an employee, but also having managed teams, and, thinking about it for an employee base as well. So there's a couple things that stand out for me. As one, I think that self-directed learning is so important these days. I think that really encouraging people to do self-directed learning is really helpful. So there are a lot of different online platforms and resource libraries, and development tools out there. So I definitely think that's one. I'm also a big fan of ongoing education, and learning. So things like we don't really talk about tuition reimbursement as much, or learning stipends, but I still think those are useful for people that want to do courses or certifications or things of that nature. And then I'm also a big fan of conferences and workshops and industry events, because it takes you outside of your bubble of just being in your company. It allows you to build external community, learn new things. So I definitely think those things stand out. And then just another one would be fostering an overall learning culture. If that's not kind of part of the mindset of the organization, then it's going to make it hard for anything else to build off of that as well. And then the other thing that comes to mind is, and I actually wrote a post about this the other day, was about leveraging employee resource groups. I think they're a great way to help identify different learning and development opportunities as well. So those are a couple that come to mind.
I love that. Erica, any thoughts on that? I have a couple follow-up questions, but I want to hear what you have to say first. Erica.
Yeah, and I loved when something sparked in my mind when you talked about conferences, because I used to be internal in a this was a Fortune 100 company, and a friend of mine managed some innovation work there.
Mm-hmm.
And they would routinely go on excursions. And I talked with her a lot about it, and it turns out, and by the way, being curious means talking to everybody about everything. She would take them to go to different activities having nothing to do with insurance. They would go to some conferences sometimes that were completely different. They would go to a theme park and do something. They would actually strategically take themselves out of the office, out of the mindset of the product that they were trying to figure out how to answer or create the answer for, specifically to spark their imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And so really that to me was the ultimate of creating a culture of curiosity, is just giving people the time at work to be able to explore other areas.
Mm-hmm.
In a
Yeah.
previous role I had, one of the things was I managed information groups, and they were in the tech area, and they were specifically cross industry. In fact, we only allowed one per industry. So like if it was enterprise architecture, it would be one from oil and gas, one from bakery, so only one. And that was so anti what you hear about, like you do research on your industry, you go to your industry conferences. But these groups were talking about how do other industries answer the same questions that we have, but just in a different way. And so it's not just about being innovative and coming up with ideas to solve something in your industry, but it's actually looking at how do others solve similar problems completely outside the workplace that you can then bring in and utilize perhaps for the first time in your industry.
Yeah.
So that's just a real, more of an easy but very outside the box thinking on how to spark that.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, like to your point, it just expands your overall thinking. And I think also develops that sense of more of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, because you start looking at things in different ways as well. Because it's not just stuff that's been in your line of sight, but now you're hearing different things, some of which, right, you know, candidly might not work for your organizational situation you're in. But when you start getting collective views from different people at different stages of companies, like you then start thinking about how could this be applied in the organization I'm at. So I just think it fosters that growth mindset.
Yeah, completely. We need to create a name today. The curiosity mindset.
The curiosity mindset.
Everyone's going to leave here and strive for a curiosity mindset. It's like growth mindset on caffeine.
On caffeine.
I love all of that, especially I mean, it's just as easy as getting out with your team. I mean, I know that I'm a remote employee. GoCo's 100% remote, but whenever we do have our in-person, meetings or get-togethers, we don't just sit around at a table and just try to go through everything. We get out and we explore new things. And since we're in marketing, we go see how other people do marketing around Houston, where we're headquartered. And so it's just, I love what both of y'all mentioned during that. So thank you. Alex, we also actually have a question for you in the Q&A.
Okay.
It says, Alex, you mentioned leveraging ERGs. We don't currently have any implemented at our company. What would you, or how would you recommend moving forward with creating these? So do you mind just explaining ERGs a little more and then answer the question?
Absolutely. So employee resource groups, and I will preface first of all by saying, like, I think if you're, depending on where you're at as a company, if you're a very small startup, it's very hard to institute ERGs. I've helped set them up as you grow and scale as a business. But if you are at that point and you are growing, then it's a great time to invest and build out ERGs. So what I find is that they really come from the best ERGs that I've ever seen come from grassroots efforts. So people that have basically said, we feel like, we collectively want to create a sort of internal community for folks. And then it's helping provide them with the advocacy, support, resources, budget to basically do that as well. And, because our workforce is made up and companies made up of so many different employees with such diverse backgrounds, it just makes people feel more heard as well. So the reason I say leveraging them in this case is because their needs around training and development or learning and development could be different from others. Depending on their specific, whether they're an underrepresented community or, whatever it may be. And also to help get them involved and part of the process, whether it's asking them to lead or facilitate sessions or discussion forums, depending on their area of expertise. I think sometimes that ERGs are underutilized. And so that's a way to really engage them. And also using them as a sounding board when you're developing initiatives. So, if a great HR function can also benefit from leveraging or, getting feedback from ERGs early on as they're developing learning initiatives. So I don't know. I know I said a lot, but I don't know if I answered the question, but hopefully I did.
Another pitch too, when you're developing those, or if you already have them developed, ERGs are the best if they are supported in ways of allotting time that the manager supports their folks joining and allows them the time so that it doesn't become an extracurricular activity for them, because we don't have time for extracurricular activity. And that's where ERGs can fall flat. So if the organization is structured in that they can actually use some of their time and that becomes part of their contribution to their performance, that can really help support them. And there's also a greater push to, if you are an ERG lead, then you get some kind of financial bonus or some kind of something, because that, again, should not just be a volunteer position.
Completely agree. And if you didn't say that, I was going to. I definitely think that depending on whatever it is, equity, bonus, whatever, these are important contributions and things that people are taking on in addition to their day job. So they should be rewarded accordingly. And I also think that, Erica, you touched on a good point, is like tying these things into learning goals so that it doesn't feel like an extracurricular either. And so it aligns back to organizational goals and people related goals within the organization.
Yep, absolutely. I have to say, Paul's doing a great shout out of some taglines. Got milk, get curious, or got curious. I actually always say be curious. That's kind of my tagline.
I was gonna call out
The way
Paul's
to go.
hat. Too. I
Yeah.
love that. I can just see it now. The got curiosity or be curious on a shirt. I
I
love
would
it.
say curiosity hat. And I'm like, I've got to get myself a hat that says curious, like be curious or curiosity or something. So that's I'll get that eventually.
I love it. Please let me know when I can order one because I would love that.
Okay.
Next question. I know that we talked a lot about ERGs and, things that we can do. I always love talking about tools and resources people can use. I want some, practical takeaways that I can go after a webinar and look it up and see how it can benefit my company or me as an employee. So, what are some specific tools that y'all really have used that have been proven effective in really enabling these initiatives? Erica, do you want to go first?
Yeah, it's a tricky question when you hit on curiosity, and one of the reasons why I delved into my own path for about a year to really break it down and figure out how to get to where I got, right? And figured out that for me to completely change how I existed in the world was curiosity. And so I spent quite a long time figuring out what that meant. And there's not a whole lot of research out there on curiosity. And the research out there is sometimes, well, it's always complementary, but there's not even an agreement really on what curiosity is. So people have different definitions. So I also created my own definition of curiosity. And so one of the reasons why I created a framework to bring into businesses is specifically because when you're talking about building curiosity, it contains a number of blocks. So it contains whether how do you become open to different perspectives? Well, that gets into how the brain's working, right? So if we are curious just to be curious, we are actually being curious through our past experiences. And so things are filtered. And so I'm not going to get into it on this, on this webinar, but to really create true deep curiosity, it's about how do you understand how the brain processes information and how to recognize that, become aware of it, and really put yourself into this open space where you can be curious without judgment. And then that gets into the listening, the questions, the all of that. And then the end all is so my framework is SOS. It's suspend, open, and seek. But the seek part is I feel, and I would love to hear Alex, your view on this. I think the biggest barrier right now to creating a culture of curiosity in today's world is technology. And by what I mean by that is that technology used to when the World Wide Web was developed, it just opened the world, right? It took away barriers. So somebody sitting in a small town could all of a sudden look at what somebody's doing across the world. I do have to caveat by those who could afford the internet and those who decided what information to put on. There's always those caveats. As technology has gotten so great, algorithms mimic our brain. So what did we search for? What do we listen for? Well, okay, let's give you more of that. But now algorithms are telling us what news that we're watching, what ads we're getting, what postings are coming into our line. So what we're now doing is our worlds are so much smaller because we are not naturally exposed to complex, diverse environments. So this is a long way of going about. I think that teams and workplaces have to make a much more concerted effort to intentionally bring in diverse opinions, diverse lived experiences. And that is not a comfortable place because we like to look for the similar because it's safe. But I always like to say, we need people to survive and people will adapt to whatever roles need to happen. But truly, we need differences to thrive. Because if we are all coming together and able to work through our strengths, we're going to be a much more well off, thought about, constructive, effective, and whole community. So that is my very long answer to say the tools and resources out there to build a culture of curiosity have to be different building blocks. But if you recognize the actual core of those blocks, you can develop something around that. Alex may have some tools though and resources that are geared at those various blocks. So long answer, but that's my little soapbox.
I like that soapbox. That's a good soapbox. And I agree with all of that. I would say specifically to your point on the tools, the first thing I'd say is like tools have become so important, especially in this day and age, tools and platforms where so many companies are remote first. So they rely on these tools and platforms for ongoing learning. So that's something to really keep in mind. I would say baseline level, and this isn't anything earth shattering, but a baseline for any company, first of all, should be having a LMS, a learning management system. And there are plenty of them out there, everything from Udemy to LinkedIn Learning to Skillshare. There's no shortage. Again, it's down to personal preference and whether it makes sense. What kind of learning management system makes sense for your business? But I would say that's baseline important. As far as other things go, things that I've seen work and I like is, first of all, knowledge sharing platforms, right? Use your internal knowledge sharing platforms to promote sort of peer-to-peer learning. I think a lot of times we think about things like Teams and Slack as just places that we go to vent or we message colleagues, but it can be used to develop peer-to-peer learning as well. So I'd say that's another one that sticks top of mind. One that I've always wished would frankly be, I'd like to see more of, frankly, I don't see enough of, is job rotation and also cross-training. I'm a big cross-training fan because that in itself involves knowledge sharing. And frankly, going back to our core love of being curious, people may come across roles that they never thought about or never understood. And that ability to cross-train now opens up a whole new world and makes them maybe rethink some of their career opportunities and what they want to do. And then another one I love, just because I'm a big community person in general, is learning communities and like developing learning communities where you can come together and talk about different topics and that you're interested in, figure out how you can upskill each other maybe in different areas depending on what each other's skill sets are. So those are the things that I have found to be very useful and that I've seen in my career.
Mm-hmm. The other like homegrown thing too is when I was managing a remote team, we lose some of that sense of that people are people.
Yeah.
And we get on a Zoom and we start going and then we're done and we go on. We lose that like 5 minutes of come into the room, get your stuff settled. And we have like water bottles that can say something about our personality. Those little clues, right? Because everyone's got like the same Zoom, like the same Zoom background. Usually, people don't usually move around, or they have a virtual one that travels with them. So I used to have once a week, and it was absolutely required of my team. It was like a chill session, and it didn't matter how busy we were, and that included me. And we had to, for an hour, get on a Zoom and talk about anything other than business. And people might say, "Oh, but I don't want to talk about personal stuff." This is incredibly silly. We are all grown adults, and will just say we'll be turning 50 this year, and we spent an hour making ourselves into potatoes and talking in different, I mean, it was just a really silly, ridiculous, like so not what you should be doing at work. But the team that we had was one team of 8 in this department. And because we were absolutely serious about that time, I kept getting people coming to me. What do you do with your team? How is your team so close? How do you get that? We had that time structured that ability for us to create a more open, safe, laughing environment. And so after those hours, everything that we hit, we could deal with because we knew that we'd have that time to bond and just to laugh together. And we didn't talk about that. Another team I was on, we were all coaches and we really loved talking about coaching. And so we would get together for like a half an hour every week and literally talk about books we read and coaching philosophies and things like that. And again, that team felt so different than other teams in the organization.
Mhm.
So the core really is about fostering curiosity, is really about fostering belonging, which is really about creating that trusted environment and expanding your mind, like Alex is saying, with the learning and pushing people. I had a manager who knew I was not happy being a business analyst. This was years ago.
Mhm.
And they had a pilot going with Coursera. And so he's like, hey, why don't you take this course I saw in Coursera? It's called Appreciative Inquiry. Nothing to do with my job. So he allotted 10% of my time so I could focus on it. And I was able to actually come up with some things to reach a different place in work that I was doing. So it ended up being a win-win, but he took that risk to say, okay, as busy as you are, take 10% of your time, go learn something. And it was a win-win.
Yeah. And
So,
I would, no, I was just going to say, you made me think also of it's so true what you said. And in my experience, of like finding different ways to connect and create that sense of belonging, particularly within a team. And one way that I've done it in the past that, based on what you've just shared, I think you'll appreciate is I've used, worked with teams where we've created what we call our one-page user manuals, right? And like, how do we like to work? How don't we like to work? What do we, just so you can get a better understanding of one another, and it creates that form of connection and community as well. So I completely agree with you. That in itself will drive curiosity.
yeah. And I'm seeing some really good questions and I appreciate these questions. Is it okay if I tackle some of those, Kaylee?
Please do. I had them ready
Yeah,
to
because
ask.
they're along the same. What we're saying is not easy. Like this stuff sounds, oh, this is great. It's not easy. The first time, actually, yeah, the first chill session that I had for my team, I literally talked and it was the most awkward team meeting I've ever had because they didn't understand what on earth I was trying to do. I had like these cards, I created like these games, and they're like, you're going crazy, Erica. Like you need time off. And it was not easy because it is completely goes against what we are all used to doing. And that's what curiosity is about, is that it's breaking through that. But it's not easy for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So you have to take those risks and you have to stay consistent. And you, as a manager or a leader or a team member who wants to do it, has to actually stick with it and create a plan. Um, for Sean, you mentioned deadlines due to the time. That's really important. None of this can be penalized.
Yeah.
And what you will find, and this comes up in coaching all the time, I don't have 45 minutes for a coaching session. Are you crazy? Like, I don't have time to take a 5-minute walk. Research has proven time and time and time again that if you break out of your desk, if you break out of your time, if you take your brain on a walk, there are chemicals that are released that cause you to be more effective and perform at a higher level once you get back to your project. So it's so hard to do that. And it's difficult for people to understand and comprehend this, but show them research. Show them the reach out to me on LinkedIn. I've got lots of research on this. I'm happy to send you some sources. Your brain performs better if it's got a break outside of what they're doing. So performances will go. In fact, I have there's, what is it? There's some research that I pulled for this. HBR did a spotlight on curiosity, 3 articles from 2018, but again, there's not a lot out there, so it's still pretty well cited. One of them is actually doing a business case for curiosity. But they found that 92% credited curious people with bringing new ideas into teams and organizations, viewed curiosity as a catalyst for job satisfaction, motivation, innovation, high performance. It in it increases engagement, enjoyment of your job, it reduces burnout, all of these things that people keep coming to coaching sessions for: stress management, burnout. Curiosity actually is proving now that that's the way to do it. That's the way to prevent it.
I love all of this. Um, Erica, I have a question for you because I know that we talked a lot about, getting your team on these calls and like having fun. What do you do when it comes to like the higher ups, the leadership? Is there a different way that you go about getting them on board for initiatives or getting them excited and not just thinking solely business, business, business? What are some ways, both of you, Erica and Alex, that you would think about when it comes to getting the higher ups, the leadership excited about learning, development, curiosity?
Yeah, it's interesting because you'll find that a lot of the greatest leaders out there didn't follow a straight path. They also made some deviation. I think her name is Stacey Cunningham, if I'm getting this correctly. Oh, I can't. I hope I'm getting it correctly. She was the first female president, I think, of NASDAQ, I think, or COO, some huge. She actually was following the career path, and then she was so burned out that she took a break and went to culinary school. And when she came back, she was completely refreshed and skyrocketed to the top. So a lot of the leaders have actually made those career, and so they've done it and they believe in it. But when you get to the leadership, something happens where as you make decisions for larger groups of people, those groups become larger, become larger, become larger. And because of the nature of that, the decisions that you're making are for much more larger groups of people, and you lose sight of what it was like when you were in there, and you lose sight of that. You're also in meetings all the time. So most leaders really encourage this, but it's the modeling, it's the making the decisions, it's creating the policies that they can do that needs to be pushed more. And that sometimes has to happen from the ground level up. Like me, I created my little team and we were like happy and everybody wanted to be a part of it. And so I, as a manager, started teaching the other managers how to do it. So that was a slow grassroots kind of build. But when you go up, as you go up in an organization, just be consciously aware that you are making decisions on a much more broad nature, and become much more, it becomes much more important to communicate to your folks either some stuff that you've done and encourage it. Performance, like Alex was saying, performance ratings, include it so that people have to do it. The other thing is leaders used to be they used to find being curious the hardest, because being able to admit that you may not have the best answer. Asking for input used to symbolize that it's a lack of experience. People will lose trust in me. And what research has found is when leaders open themselves up to feedback, open themselves up to other ideas, and follow up on it, and that's key, the trust in that person's leadership actually grew. And so if more leaders were to have that, but here's the thing, and Alex and I have both stressed the take action piece of it. If you are opening yourself up to getting different feedback, getting ideas, getting brainstorms, if some team has a great great idea that's kind of out of the box, but still gets you to the same place or even higher. Listen to it, really ask those questions, show that you're interested. If you are not able to do it, come back and explain why. Because if you just hear people and you never do anything about it and you never tell them anything, you're going to lose ground real fast. Mm-hmm. But even if you, people don't like people, they just want to know that it was considered. If the brain doesn't have information, it's going to go for the negative because it wants to be able to arm itself to survive. So uncertainty becomes a danger. Uncertainty is different than being told no. Being told no and explained why is much easier, much better for the brain. Sorry, Alex.
No, it's okay. I was gonna add that, I've always said the CEOs and leaders that I have loved working the most with are the ones that have literally said, I know what I know and I don't know what I don't know. And that's why you're here. That in itself already says, well, you're great. Then you're not going to have an ego about things. You're going to be very curious to learn. And this is going to be highly collaborative. So I think surrounding yourself with leaders like that is really important. The other thing, though, I would say, particularly, Kaylee, to get at this question, to your point of how to get leaders excited, is yes, even if they're curious, they'll still want to understand the ROI that comes with this. So what is it that, how is this going to impact our learning goals, right? How is this going to make us a more productive organization? What has this done for retention? Like all of these things are going to be questions that they're going to come up with and want answers to. So you also need to be armed with those things as well. So I think that's the difference when you start getting up into the C-suite, because they are going to want to hold you accountable for those things as well, because they want to know that if we are providing these opportunities, we also want to see what it's doing for the organization.
Yeah, and retention is a big number for people. And curiosity research has shown. So there are numbers out there. In fact, Merck, I don't know if they dropped it or I keep looking for it, but Merck KG, what is it? I wrote it down. Merck KGaA Darmstadt, Germany. They're a company who lives and thrives on curiosity, and they every other year did a State of the Curiosity report. They actually partnered with HBR for the spotlight. So if you look them up, they do have their latest right now, at least, is 2020. I keep waiting for the 2022. I'm not sure what happened during COVID with this, but they do a whole benchmarking on curiosity and they have their own rankings. But yeah, there are numbers that you can tie to it. And I agree with Alex. When it comes to making changes, you got to show the numbers.
So let me start off by saying there are a million different questions that I want to ask, and I'm so sad that we only have like 15 minutes left. But this is a good segue into measuring success, because sometimes it's not, always tangible numbers that we can give. So what are some ways that organizations can measure success of their, curiosity, growth, learning and development initiatives? Alex, do you want to start?
How did I have a feeling that you were going to come to me first? I just had this strange feeling. Yeah, I think that, look, I think it kind of goes back to just the point we were making, is that people they want to be curious, they want to cultivate these cultures, but they do want to measure it, right? In different forms as well. I would say the first thing that immediately comes to mind that is, it's a very, I would say this is kind of baseline, is sort of employee engagement and satisfaction surveys, but also maybe layering on focus groups, particularly within things like ERGs. That is a way to start measuring things as well. I talked earlier about learning management systems and different platforms. I'd say, assessing how much those are being used and how much participation people are seeing in that is a good idea. That way you can basically get it track and see whether things are working or whether you need to start shaking stuff up. So analyzing that data is going to help you identify gaps as well. And then, the other thing that I would also kind of highlight is probably just if you can come across any skill development and knowledge sharing metrics too. That's one where you can really kind of start measuring the number of new skills or certifications that people have obtained over a period of time as well. So those are the things that come to mind out the gate.
Yeah, and if you look at the Merck example, the Curiosity Report, they measure, so they actually created questions as a baseline and then they built on that. And I'm sure that you could probably tie it to retention, or I'm sure many of you have pulse surveys that go out, but some of they do like, how many believe that curiosity catalysts new ideas? How many think it inspires unique, valuable talents? How many think it helps get one promoted? So just in the employee engagement, the employee retention, the belonging, all of those metrics can be used to help the curiosity. And it's really establishing what your company views as curiosity.
Yeah. And I would say, you just touched on, I mean, that's another way to measure it. You talked about retention, we talked about it before, that and turnover rates, right? That helps you better understand. Because, particularly for people who've been high performing or in any critical roles that may have left, you really want to understand that data a little bit more. And then on the flip side, I'd also be curious to look at any client or customer satisfaction and feedback, right? Have clients given a strong indication that you're creating a culture of curiosity and learning too? So I think always having that internal and external perspective can be super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Well, thank you both so much for that. I know that measuring ROI is crucial at any company, so thank you. I'm gonna kind of go off track a little bit here because we have some questions about siloed employees. I've had questions submitted pre-webinar. I've seen it a little bit in here, and it's so easy, especially I hate using the phrase in today's day and age, but like in today's world with so many remote employees, remote companies, what role can like either mentorship programs, peer-to-peer learning opportunities, etc., play into, empowering employees to take ownership in their growth and their opportunities at a company? Erica, do you want to start?
Sure. I will say that if you want to empower your employees, you have to model and allow the behavior and work it into the system. Otherwise, your employees may feel like they are not able to reach out cross team. There are environments that are more kind of that agile development. I'm going to put in quotes because it's tech tech-like people have this idea, right? But the agile environment, people feel free to cross teams, ask questions. Alex's job shadow, things like that, have conversations. And then there's the people who, like employees that I coach, who are terrified to ask their manager one question. So I'm obviously big proponent of coaching because it's individualized, but in the remote setting, your action needs to be intentional. So it can be taking on the job shadow idea, and I'm going like this because Alex is right there in my screen. Kaylee's there, Barb's there. Is that have departments have people cross attend team meetings so they can learn more. Managers have to encourage their employees to reach out and have informational interviews, conversations. People who are going to want to be a leadership is a quality. It's not a role. As I view it, this is how I view it. So it doesn't matter if you're fresh out of college or you are a C-suite. Everybody can develop their leadership qualities and understand what type of leader they want. If they see somebody that they admire, go ask them their career journey. Everyone likes talking about their career journey. So work that into, I had somebody who works into being able to talk to people and have conversations with other departments, and that's actually something they report back. And they came up with that idea. And so you have to strategically, because being siloed is a problem. Being siloed is a problem, but strategically, you just have to make time and make it part of your role.
I would just add, so I completely, and we've talked about obviously a few times, is the importance of, you know, leadership modeling the right behaviors and them themselves not creating silos. But I do want to also add the finer point that you as an individual can also break down silos. You don't need to wait for somebody to do that to you or for you in a remote environment, right? Nobody is preventing you from reaching out to set up a conversation with somebody in a different function and learn more about what they do, right? Nobody is doing that. And in the process, think about the knowledge sharing that comes with that as well. So I have specifically had roles where I have had to, you know, fix an HR team or transform an HR team that was very siloed. And part of that was because they were getting in their own way. They weren't figuring out how they could engage with other people as well. And so it, as much as leadership plays a part, you on an individual, if you really believe in empowerment, should feel empowered enough to like take the first step and reach out. Don't wait for somebody to tell you to do that either.
There's also things like Slack has something called donuts, or it used to be called donuts, where you sign up for donuts and you get, you can probably set how often. I think they gave us like one every 2 weeks or what. I can't remember what it was.
That's at GoCo.
But donuts are so fun because what it does is it randomly pairs you with somebody else in the company, and it tracks if you get, if like who's, it tells you who you're paired with, which of the two of you has the responsibility to reach out and schedule something, and then it follows up, did you already schedule something? So there's a lot of like encouragement and stats. And I will never forget, I got paired with one of the co-founders of the company, and I was like, well, that donut's not gonna happen. That donut happened. And that to me is how leadership can model. But that was so fun because I got paired with people from all different departments. And it was something that the company just had set up through Slack. So I love things like that.
We do the donut meetups at GoCo. We use Slack, and it is when I get that notification that pops up that I have a donut with someone, I am over the moon. I love it so much because you're so right, Erica. I'm paired up with people who I don't interact with on a daily basis. Maybe they're on the engineering team and they live in Brazil, so I just don't get to talk to them as much. And then I learn about their culture and where they started. And it's beautiful. I love it so much. We also have it set up to where it's marketing and sales as well, because we work so closely with our sales team. And I just get to talk to, our AEs or our SDRs and just learn about them and more as just people. So I love it. I am a proponent of donuts all the way.
Yeah.
Now you both have me curious about donuts, you know?
Somebody said they like Krispy Kreme. Yeah, Krispy Kremes are pretty good. I live in a town right now that doesn't even have a Dunkin' Donuts. Kind of
That's,
wrap your brain around that.
that's wild. Well, I love the way this conversation's going. I have one more question that I'd like to ask. We also have a couple Q&A that we'll hopefully be able to get to, and then I'll share a little bit about GoCo Bravely and share the Sherman HRCI codes. But last question, in your experience, what are some long-term benefits for like organizations really successfully empowering their employees to foster that curiosity, that growth? I know that we could probably have a session entirely dedicated to this question, but what are y'all's initial thoughts?
Go for it, Alex.
I was like, is it me or is it you first? There's a number of things, but I think the first thing that comes to mind is that it needs to become part of the fabric of your company, right? Like if you're doing some of these things on an ad hoc or one-off basis, then you're not building it into the arc of what you do or your people strategy. So I've always found it interesting when I've joined companies and I'm like, well, we don't do this. And it's like, oh, well, we did it 3 years ago. I'm like, well, it doesn't exist today. So I think if you want to build momentum and you want to be known for something and you want to consistently evolve it, then it has to be part of your fabric, your strategy, and what you do on a day-to-day basis. Like everything else is a build from there. So that would be my starting off point. Eric, I'm curious what you think.
I totally agree 100%. And if you do that, the long-term benefits is that you have employees that want to come and work for your company, who are recommending your company, who want to stay loyal to your company, who do a really good job because they love the culture of your company. And that improves the bottom line completely.
I love
Period.
that. Period. End of story. I love it. I am going to share my screen really quick with everyone and just give you a little bit of info about the sponsors of today's webinar. So as you can see by my shirt and my background, I'm with GoCo. We are an all-in-one HRIS, and our goal is to make HR professionals' lives easier by automating those manual tasks or those very tedious tasks like payroll, performance reviews, workflows, time, all of that, just so that you can focus more on your people. And I can't talk about GoCo without talking about our incredible client success team. Every client of GoCo gets a dedicated client success manager, so we don't send you to an automated robot or a chat bot to just answer all your questions. You get fast, hands-on support all the time. And then I'm going to pass it over to Erica to talk a little bit about Bravely.
Absolutely. And there's a QR code you can go in and grab there. Bravely, I have been a coach for almost 4 years now. I chose Bravely to coach and apply to coach for because they have a very strong commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. It is pulled throughout. Our coaching community is unbelievable. We do one-to-one coaching that is highly individualized. It is customized. It's a very thorough vetting process. We're all over the globe, so your employees can have coaches that speak in their native language, understand their culture. We can help them work with somebody who pair them with somebody who they want if they feel more comfortable with a certain identity. Bravely also has a phenomenal learning program with 6 courses for the manager, and I think we're up to 2 maybe for individual contributors. They are highly interactive, and they were designed with coaching undercurrent throughout and along the forgetting curve. So it basically was designed so that you retain the most information if you follow the full course. And we're also getting into specialized executive leadership coaching because so many of us have specialized in that we're kind of carving that out so we can highly customize with you. And I will say it is a benefit that employees, I think it's like 92% leave their first session with a new skill. But talk about empowerment and feeling heard. One-to-one coaching is how you do it.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much. I've loved working with Bravely on this webinar. Your entire team is great. Erica, Alex, any final thoughts or words?
No, I had so much fun. I could talk to the 2 of you for forever. We're going to stay connected, Alex.
Totally. I feel the same way. I don't think we can end on a better note than that, to be honest. So
I love it. I think that my next intro question for my next webinar has to be what everyone's go-to donut order is, because I've seen a couple donut talk in the chat. So I think I know what my breakfast is tomorrow. But thank you both so much for being here. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I am very excited for the next time I see you all. And with that, I hope you have a great rest of your week. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
thanks,
you, everyone.
everyone.
Be curious.
Yes,
Be curious.
be curious. Bye.
Bye.